What if the Hollywood family you admired most was hiding a nightmare behind every red carpet smile? What if the same woman who once walked beside Tom Hanks on the set of A League of Their Own, the daughter of When Harry Met Sally director Rob Reiner, was now staring down a life sentence for helping kill her own parents? And what if the only reason we even found out the truth was because the youngest Reiner, Romy, saw something no one else dared admit? Because that's what this story is about. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Not fame, not legacy, not even murder. It's about silence, secrets, and what happens when loyalty turns lethal. Let's take you back to Sunday night, December 14th, Brentwood, Southern California, just after midnight. The Reiner estate is quiet. Too quiet. The $13.5 million property, tucked into one of Los Angeles's most exclusive neighborhoods, should have been preparing for the holidays. Fairy lights blinked along the hedges. A wreath hung, untouched, on the oak-paneled front door. To anyone driving by, it looked like a picture of peace. But inside the home, a horror no Christmas movie could prepare you for. Rob Reiner, 78, dead, stabbed multiple times in the chest. His wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, 70, also dead. Brutal sharp force trauma. Defensive wounds on her arms. Signs of a struggle. And the person who found them? Not the housekeeper. Not the police. But their 27-year-old daughter, Romy. And here's where things go from devastating to chilling. According to initial police reports, Romy entered the home after trying to reach her parents for hours. She'd spent the earlier part of the day with friends, but something felt off. A missed lunch. Unanswered calls. A text from her father left on read. She used her spare key. And what she walked into, she'll never forget. The bodies. The blood. The silence. And then, something strange. The house hadn't been broken into. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. No windows smashed. No door ajar. So what happened? Let me ask you. When a locked house is the scene of a double homicide, who becomes suspect number one? Someone with access. And in this case, there were only three. Nick Reiner, their 32-year-old son, living in the guest house. Tracy Reiner, their older daughter, visiting from out of state. And Romy, the girl who made the call. Now pause right there. Think about that. Imagine the trauma of losing your parents in such a brutal, sudden way. Now imagine watching as police begin to suspect you. Or worse, the people you love. That's what Romy faced. A media storm. An invasive investigation. Endless questions. Cameras in her face before she could even process what she'd witnessed. But what she told police that night. That's when everything changed. Because Romy didn't just find the bodies. She named a suspect. A dangerous family member, in her words. One she said had a long history of manipulation, control, and emotional abuse. But here's the twist. She didn't name Nick. Not at first. She named Tracy. Yes, Tracy Reiner. Hollywood actress. Mother. The adopted daughter of Rob Reiner and Penny Marshall. A woman with decades of credits under her belt. The idea that she could be involved in something like this? Unthinkable. Until the evidence started to pile up. Let me be clear. Tracy didn't plunge the knife, at least not according to the prosecution. But what she did, allegedly, may have made the murders possible. She had access. She knew her parents' routine. She'd had screaming matches with Rob in the past, witnessed by neighbors, friends, even family members. And according to one inside source, Rob had been planning to cut her off financially in the new year. Suddenly, motive emerges. But you know what's even stranger? Tracy wasn't even the first Reiner arrested. That would be Nick. Yes, the youngest son, long troubled, long protected. A man with his own complicated past. He was arrested the night of the murders, found wandering the backyard of the estate, barefoot, incoherent, blood on his shirt. That's the headline the world saw. Reiner's son arrested in parents' double murder. But behind that headline was something darker, something more disturbing. Because by the time Tracy was brought in for questioning, police already had doubts about Nick's confession. It didn't quite add up. His story changed. The timeline shifted. There were inconsistencies, gaps. And when detectives pulled phone records, surveillance footage, and security logs, a different figure began to emerge. One who was present at the house that night. One who lied about where she was. One who left behind traces that couldn't be explained away. Tracy, And when the trial began, all eyes were on her. This wasn't just a case of murder. It was a case of betrayal, legacy, and the destruction of a family that once stood as Hollywood's moral compass. Because Rob Reiner wasn't just another celebrity. He was Rob Reiner, director of Stand By Me, the mind behind The Princess Bride, the man who made you cry, laugh, believe in love. And Michelle? More than just the wife. A celebrated photographer, a fierce advocate, a quiet powerhouse. Together, they were a team, a Hollywood love story, an institution, now reduced to a case number, a courtroom photo, a memory. Let that sink in. How does a family that built its name on storytelling end in such a horrific, unspeakable plot twist? Well, that's what we're about to uncover. Because this isn't just a whodunit. It's a whydunit. A how could they? It's the unraveling of one of Hollywood's most respected dynasties. Over the next hour, we're going to pull back the velvet curtain and walk you through every twist, every clue, every betrayal. From the final family dinner, to the eerie silence of the guest house, to a basement box that should have never existed, to the missing 13 minutes of security footage that may hold the final answer. We'll meet detectives who risked their careers, family members who broke ranks, a courtroom stunned into silence, and one daughter, Romy, who risked everything to speak the truth. But I have to warn you, what you're about to hear will change the way you look at Hollywood forever, because sometimes fairy tales end in blood, and sometimes the villain is the last person you'd ever expect. Coming up, what happened the night of December 14th at the Reiner mansion, and what chilling piece of evidence did police discover in a locked guest house trunk? You're not going to believe what they found. But first, let's rewind to the night before the murders, where everything started to fall apart. What do you say to someone when you sense it might be the last time you'll ever sit across from them? That was the unspoken energy lingering over the Reiner family dinner table on the night of December 13th. Tension disguised as small talk, smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes, knives scraping plates just a little too hard, everyone playing their part. But underneath it all, an explosion waiting for permission to go off. The Brentwood estate was dressed for the holidays. Candles flickered. The dining room smelled like rosemary lamb and truffle potatoes. An expensive bottle of Burgundy sat half-empty near Rob's plate. But no one really touched their food, because the real feast that night was emotional carnage. Let's set the scene. Rob Reiner sat at the head of the table, as he always did. Quiet, observing, maybe even disappointed. To his right, Michelle Singer Reiner, restless, shifting in her seat. She had always played the role of the family's quiet strength, but tonight, she seemed brittle, like she was holding something in. To Rob's left, Tracy Reiner. She arrived late. She always did. But this time, it wasn't casual lateness. It was deliberate, calculated. She wore black. Not holiday black, funeral black. A satin blouse, too formal for a family dinner. Her hair slicked back, eyes rimmed with heavy liner. A statement. Nick was already there when she walked in, sitting across the table, hoodie on, barely making eye contact, picking at his nails. And Romy? She sat near the window, quiet, watching, the youngest of the family, the one people forgot to listen to, until it was far too late. The Reiners hadn't shared a meal like this in months. This wasn't about family tradition. This was about confrontation. Because according to several family friends interviewed later, Rob had made a decision. And everyone at that table knew it. He was cutting Tracy off financially. Not in a dramatic, rage-fueled, you're dead to me kind of way. Worse, he was doing it legally, methodically, through a clause in the trust, rewritten just weeks before. And she knew. Let that sink in. Imagine being told, quietly, coldly, by the man who raised you, that you're no longer welcome at the table you once called home, that everything you thought was yours by birthright was being reassigned. And then having to sit there, eat, pretend to celebrate the season. That's the emotional temperature of that dinner. Now here's where it gets darker. Multiple sources say Rob wasn't just cutting off Tracy. He was shifting primary inheritance to Romy. Yes, Romy, the youngest, the quiet one, the one Tracy used to call the baby. And Romy didn't know. Not yet. But Tracy did. And that knowledge? It was a storm brewing just behind her eyes. She barely touched her food. Instead, she asked pointed questions. About Romy's new art exhibit. About Nick's therapist. About who was visiting for the holidays. Normal questions, on the surface. But her tone? Sharp, almost mocking. At one point, she turned to Rob and said something chilling. You always liked her better, didn't you? Witnesses later said the room fell silent. Rob didn't answer. He didn't need to. That silence said it all. Because the truth? Yes, he did favor Romy. Not because she was perfect, but because she was honest. Tracy wasn't, and Rob knew it. Now let's pause. How does a dinner conversation escalate into double homicide? It doesn't. Not right away, but it plants the seeds. And that night, those seeds were planted deep. Michelle tried to smooth things over. She always did. She joked about the food. She mentioned old holiday memories. She even played a short clip from this as Spinal Tap on her phone, hoping to make everyone laugh. No one did. The mood was beyond saving. Then came the moment that turned everything. Rob cleared his throat. He reached into a folder beside his chair and pulled out several documents. Romy would later say it looked like a script reading. But it wasn't a script. It was a final notice. The updated trust. He said calmly, I wanted you to see it from me, not from lawyers. Tracy froze. Nick looked confused. Romy didn't know what she was looking at. But Tracy knew. She snatched the papers. Skimmed. Jaw tight. Hands shaking. You rewrote the will. It's not a will, Rob said. It's a trust. And yes, you're erasing me. I'm protecting the people who've earned it. The air cracked. Silence again. But this time, not stunned. Simmering. Romy reportedly whispered, Dad, maybe not tonight. But it was too late. Tracy stood up. Her chair scraped violently against the hardwood. She said one thing before leaving the room. You think you're in control, but you have no idea what you've started. And she left. Nick got up too, unsure, but agitated. He followed her. The rest of the night? A blur. No one really remembers what was said after that. But here's what we do know. Security footage shows Tracy pacing in the driveway later that night. Phone records reveal 3 missed calls from her to Nick, between 1:47 a.m. and 2:09 a.m. And in the background of one of Romy's photos posted earlier that evening, Tracy is glaring, almost like she's watching everything fall apart from a distance. Let's rewind to that photo. A soft focus shot of Romy's glass of wine. Christmas lights twinkling in the distance. A classic artsy Instagram post. But zoom in. There's a reflection in the mirror behind her. And it's unmistakable. Tracy, standing near the hallway, looking directly into the camera. Eyes wide. Almost caught. And that photo? It would later become Exhibit B in the trial. A single frame. But one that proved she never really left the house. Now ask yourself this. Why lie about your whereabouts? Why place yourself away from the crime scene? Unless you had something to hide. Unless you weren't just angry. You were already planning something. Because sometime between 2:10 and 3:00 a.m., the Reiners were killed. Multiple stab wounds. No signs of struggle downstairs. But upstairs? Chaos. Furniture overturned. A shattered lamp. Tracy's fingerprints on the stair rail. Nick's DNA on the broken glass. 2 killers? Or a struggle gone wrong? We'll get to that. But one more thing about that night. Romy. She went to bed early. Headphones in. Fell asleep editing a video. She only woke when she heard a thud. One loud noise. Followed by silence. Then, nothing. Until she found their bodies the next morning. But here's the detail that no one talks about enough. At 3:17 a.m., Tracy's phone pinged near the garden gate. The one that leads to the guest house. Nick's place. They say she went to confront him. Or maybe to recruit him. Either way, what happened next would shatter what little was left of the Reiner family. Because by dawn, 2 were dead. One was dazed, and one was gone. But Tracy didn't run. She came back to the estate at 6:41 a.m., claimed she'd left her scarf, and when asked why she returned, she said, I just felt like something was wrong. Was it guilt? Was it cleanup? Or was it part of the plan? We don't have all those answers. But we do have what happened next. Because when police arrived, they didn't expect what Romy would say. And they definitely didn't expect what they'd find buried beneath Nick's guest house. But we'll get there. Because the real horror of this case wasn't what happened during the murders. It was what came after. The lies. The blame. The one moment that turned suspicion into certainty. And that moment started with the opening of a single locked trunk. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately known something was wrong? Not just out of place. Not just messy. But wrong. That's exactly what Romy Reiner felt the moment her feet crossed the threshold of her childhood home's master bedroom. And she would never feel right again. Because it wasn't just a scene of chaos she walked into. It was a crime scene soaked in blood, betrayal, and secrets. But how did we get there? Let's rewind just a few hours. It was past 3 a.m. when Romy jolted awake. The house was quiet. Too quiet. And then came the sound that would haunt her for the rest of her life. A sharp thud, then dragging, then silence. Not the kind of silence you ignore. The kind that makes your stomach drop before your brain even knows why. She paused her music, took off her headphones, listened. Nothing. And then came the smell. Blood has a smell, you know. It's metallic, thick, like pennies soaked in vinegar. Once you've smelled it, you never forget. Romy sat up in bed. She called out, softly at first. Mom. No answer. She tried again. Dad. Still nothing. She stood, heart racing. The hallway outside her bedroom was dark, save for the faint orange glow of the nightlight near the stairs. Barefoot, wearing only a t-shirt and leggings, she tiptoed toward the main hall. As she descended the stairs, something else hit her. The front door was slightly ajar. Strange. Her dad always triple-locked it. At the bottom of the stairs, she noticed a trail. At first, she thought it was wine. But then she saw the handprint. Pressed against the wall. Dark. Wet. Red. And that's when she started to shake. She picked up her pace. Past the dining room. Past the glass cabinets. Past the fireplace where Christmas stockings still hung like they were waiting for Santa. Then she saw it. The door to the master bedroom, cracked open. Just enough to see that something was very, very wrong inside. The carpet outside was soaked. Her father's slipper lay sideways in the hallway. And inside the room, chaos. Furniture overturned. Lamp shattered. Michelle's favorite necklace, broken, on the floor. And there, between the bed and the bathroom door, Rob, unmoving, covered in blood, eyes open, staring at the ceiling like he'd seen the devil himself. Romy gasped, but no scream came. She rushed in, and then saw her mother. Michelle was curled in the corner, hands still gripping a lamp cord. Blood smeared across her blouse. She'd fought, hard, but lost. Both parents, gone. Romy dropped to her knees. She reached for her dad, but instinctively pulled back. The warmth was gone. His chest still. That's when she screamed. A sound so loud, so primal, that it woke the neighbors. And one of them, luckily, was already calling 911 before she could even find her phone. What Romy didn't know then. The moment she screamed, a chain reaction began. Because not only had a double homicide just occurred in one of the most protected neighborhoods in Los Angeles, it had happened inside the home of Hollywood royalty. And the suspect was still on the property. Let that sink in. Police arrived in under 5 minutes. They didn't need to break in. The door was still ajar. The first officer on scene, Detective Serena Alvarez, later said, I've seen a lot of crime scenes, but this one felt personal. Rage. Not random. You could feel it in the air. She found Romy shaking on the floor, hyperventilating, screaming the same thing over and over. They were murdered. They were murdered. Officer Alvarez called for backup. The property was locked down. Every exit monitored. And then, they found Nick. In the backyard, sitting cross-legged on the grass. In a daze. Blood on his sleeves. Shoes missing. When questioned, he said 5 words that made no sense at the time. I tried to stop her. Stop who? Officers handcuffed him immediately. He didn't resist. He just stared at the garden gate, like he was waiting for someone to come back. That someone was Tracy, but we'll get to her in a moment. Because what happened in the next hour would shift suspicion, spark outrage, and throw Romy into a tailspin of disbelief. Back inside the house, forensic teams got to work. They noted the distinct lack of forced entry. They also noted that the Reiners' state-of-the-art security system had been disabled manually from inside. That's right. Someone who knew the code, the wiring, the layout, a family member. They found blood trails leading from the bedroom to the staircase, and another trail leading away from the house, toward the guest house. Nick's place. Inside his space, things were strangely tidy. Except for one thing. The bathroom sink. Red water. A damp towel. Razor blades in the bin. But no weapon. Still, there was no sign of anyone else. Until they reviewed the guest house entry logs. A keycard had been used at 2:47 a.m. Not Nick's. Tracy's. She had returned. Despite claiming she left at 11:45 p.m., the system showed her badge used the guest house door nearly 3 hours later. She lied, and that lie would unravel her entire defense. By 6:30 a.m., she returned to the main house. Calm, clean, collected, told officers she just had a bad feeling and wanted to check on her parents. She claimed she hadn't seen or heard anything. She claimed she was asleep at a hotel downtown. And yet, she offered no hotel key. No timestamp, no rideshare logs, just her word. But Romy wasn't buying it. Because earlier that week, she'd read something in her father's planner. A note scribbled next to December 14th. T confrontation. Stay calm. Lock docs. She didn't know what it meant then. But now, she was sure. Tracy had motive. And quite possibly an accomplice. Here's where things twist. While Nick sat in custody, and Tracy tried to charm detectives, a technician discovered something disturbing. The estate's hardwired security cameras had a 13-minute gap in footage. From 2:39 a.m. to 2:52 a.m., exactly when the murders occurred. The system hadn't glitched. It had been shut off, then turned back on, manually, by someone inside. Someone who knew how. Again, Tracy, a filmmaker, a director, a Reiner. She knew where the cameras were, how they worked. She'd filmed in that house before. She'd even helped set up the system. And then came the kicker. Inside Rob's study, detectives found a piece of evidence that changed everything. A voicemail, left at 2:44 a.m., from Rob, to his lawyer. The message? Slurred, panicked, brief. Tracy's here. She knows. I think she. It cut off. But that was all the prosecution needed. A voice, a timestamp, a warning, and then silence. Rob never finished that call. Because just minutes later, he was dead. So now, let's ask the question you've probably been screaming since the beginning. Why? Why would Tracy do it? Why would she risk everything? The legacy, the career, her freedom. Some say it was about money. Others say it was deeper. Resentment, control, being replaced. But Romy? She said something different. She told police. Tracy always said that if she couldn't control the family, she'd destroy it. I thought she was joking. I was wrong. And Nick? To this day, he claims he tried to stop her. That she came to his guest house. That she cried. That she begged for help. That she said, "They're going to erase me." But the question remains. Did he help? Did he stab? Did he plan? Because if so, this wasn't just a crime of passion. It was conspiracy. And the evidence was waiting. Not in the house. Not in the bedroom. But beneath the floorboards of the guest house. In a trunk locked tight since the night of the murders. And what was inside would shake the investigation wide open. Who do you trust when everyone in your family could be a killer? That was the question detectives faced the morning after the Reiner double homicide. And at the center of it all was one man. One shadowy figure who, for years, had danced on the edge of the spotlight, barely holding it together. Nick Reiner, the youngest son, the problem child, the recovering addict, the enigma, and the one person who might have known the truth all along. But here's where things get messy. Because in the beginning, no one was looking at Tracy. All eyes were on Nick. And why wouldn't they be? He lived on the property. He was found at the scene. His clothes had blood on them. And his own words, "I tried to stop her," made him look like he was already halfway into a confession. But was it a cry for help? Or a twisted attempt to shift blame? Let's rewind a little. Nick Reiner had always been the troubled one. In his 20s, he was in and out of rehab. Battled opioid addiction, rumored mental breakdowns, whispers of violent outbursts, quiet hushes from family friends, the kind of stories Hollywood buries until it can't. Rob and Michelle had done everything they could. Therapists, interventions, even letting him live in the guest house, just feet from their front door, in what friends described as a constant state of concern. But he never quite got clean. Not completely, not consistently. And it was this history, this fragile, chaotic past, that made him the perfect suspect. The public didn't hesitate. The tabloids pounced. Nick Reiner, killer's son? Drug rage leads to double murder? Headlines screamed. Comment sections frothed. And in that noise, no one was asking, what if he wasn't alone? Because as investigators soon discovered, there was something about Nick's behavior that didn't quite make sense. He wasn't frantic when they found him. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't even surprised. He was calm, empty, like the fight had already left him. When they questioned him, he said he had no memory of what happened between 2 and 3 a.m. But in the same breath, he told them, "She said they were cutting us out. She said it was war now." "Who's she?" detectives asked. He wouldn't answer. Not then. But he didn't need to. Because just hours later, Romy filled in the blank. She told investigators something that chilled them to their core. Nick and Tracy had been talking more. Secretly. Late-night calls. Whispered conversations. I heard them. I asked what was going on. Tracy said, "We're just strategizing." Strategizing? About what? The will? The estate? Control? We don't know. But what we do know is this. Romy had always been closest to her dad. Nick had always been closest to Tracy. He adored her, idolized her, listened to her more than anyone else. She called him my little knight. He called her T. They had a language, a bond. And it may have become a weapon. Because when the updated trust papers were revealed, showing Tracy's cut and Romy's rise, Nick didn't take it well. He told a friend the next day, "I'm nothing without this family, and they're trying to erase me." Sound familiar? That same phrase was used by Tracy just hours before the murders. Two people, two reactions, one common enemy, their parents. But here's where it gets darker. The morning after the murders, when police searched Nick's guest house, they noticed something odd. In the corner of the living room, under a throw rug, the floor creaked differently. Hollow. They peeled it back. A square cutout. A makeshift hatch. And underneath? A storage trunk. Old. Dusty. Locked. It took them less than 5 minutes to pop it open. And inside, evidence that shattered the case wide open. Item 1. A pair of latex gloves. Bloodstained. Both left and right. Item 2. A black hoodie, identical to the one Nick was wearing, but clean. Too clean. Item 3. A small knife. Partially wiped. Handle engraved with the letter T. Yes, T. And finally, item 4. A handwritten note. Torn. Jagged edges. A confession? No. A plan. It read, "Entry at 2:30. Cameras cut. Doors unlocked from inside. Take control of upstairs first. Leave no trace. Remove the envelope. Lock the trunk. Leave by 3. No names. No signatures. But the handwriting? It wasn't Nick's. And it wasn't Rob's. A forensic analyst later confirmed. The writing matched Tracy Reiner's. Let that sink in. A murder plan. In her handwriting. Found in Nick's trunk. And yet, Nick claimed he had never seen it before. So how did it get there? Planted? Given to him? Did Tracy come to the guest house that night, as security logs suggest, and leave behind more than just paranoia? Nick's legal team thought so. They argued that he was used, manipulated, an emotional weapon, triggered by Tracy, who they claimed had orchestrated the entire crime. But the prosecution didn't buy it. They said it was teamwork. Two siblings. One crime. Different roles. Same goal. And Romy? She said something that haunts this case to this day. Tracy used Nick's pain. She always did. He thought she was helping him, but she was dragging him down with her. So here we are. A brother and sister. Bound by blood. Torn by betrayal. And standing at the center of one of the most horrifying family tragedies Hollywood has ever seen. But the real question? Who really pulled the strings? Who pulled the knife? And what else was hidden in that house? Because just when police thought they had it all, a new clue emerged. One no one expected. A voice recording. Left on Tracy's own phone. Never deleted. Accidentally backed up to the cloud. And when investigators played it, they heard something chilling. A whisper. Two voices. One male, one female. And a single sentence that turned the entire trial on its head. We go up together. Or we go down together. What would you do if you opened a box that held the key to your family's destruction? Would you close it? Pretend you never saw it? Or would you dare to dig deeper? Because that's exactly what happened when the forensic team returned to the Reiner estate. This time, with a search warrant that went beyond the bedrooms, beyond the guest house, beyond what they thought they already knew. They went downstairs, to the basement, a space most outsiders didn't even know existed. Because Rob Reiner's basement wasn't your typical Hollywood wine cellar or home gym. It was a vault. A literal, climate-controlled, fireproof, soundproof vault hidden behind a false wall near the laundry room. No windows, no signs, and no one but Rob, Michelle, and Tracy had the keypad code. Let that sink in. The vault wasn't listed in the blueprints submitted when the estate was built. It was added later, discreetly, privately, with no contractor names attached. Only a payment record. Cryptically labeled Archive Retreat Room. Archive? Retreat? Or hideaway? What was inside? No one knew, until that warrant cracked it open. And when the metal door creaked and the team stepped in, even seasoned investigators were rattled. The room was lined wall to wall with shelves. Not just books, binders, color-coded, labeled, dated, personal records, family journals, contracts, diaries, a lifetime of documentation, everything Rob and Michelle had kept close to the chest. But it wasn't the shelves that caught their attention first. It was the box, positioned in the center of the room, like someone had prepared it, left it waiting, almost gift-wrapped in silence. It was matte black, reinforced corners, steel latches, a thick fingerprint lock that had already been disengaged recently. The lid was slightly ajar, and inside, hell, let's break it down. Item 1, a stack of letters, each one addressed to T, each one from Rob, over the course of 3 years. Painfully handwritten. Raw. Apologies. Please. Warnings. In one letter, dated 6 months before the murders, Rob wrote, "You scare your mother. I don't say that lightly. Your moods, your silence, your threats. I want to believe you're still our daughter, but the woman in front of us isn't the Tracy we raised. In another, we know what you're capable of, and we're tired of walking on eggshells." And then, one that read, "If anything happens to me or your mother, I want this box to speak for us." They were never mailed, never given, just stored, waiting. Item 2, a sealed envelope marked Will Prior Draft. This was key. It showed that, just 2 weeks before the final trust revision, Rob and Michelle had considered leaving everything to Tracy. Everything. But then, a sudden change. Notes scribbled in the margins. Too unstable. Talk to Romy. Or must take lead. It was a reversal. One that likely devastated Tracy, and explained her sudden coldness in the weeks before the murders. Item 3, a USB drive, labeled only, insurance. Its contents? Security footage, but not from the night of the murder. From 2 weeks earlier. It showed Tracy entering the vault, alone, at 3:14 a.m. She typed the code, walked in, spent 26 minutes inside, left with something under her coat. She knew where everything was. She'd been here before. But there was no record of what she took, only that she was inside, and that she hadn't told anyone. When investigators confronted her legal team with this footage, they claimed Tracy had every right. She was a family member. She was reviewing legacy materials. But then came item 4, and no excuse could cover it. Item 4, a bloodstained scarf, dark green, cashmere, monogrammed with the letter R. It was Romy's. She hadn't seen it in months. She thought she'd left it at a friend's. But here it was, in a locked box inside a secret vault. And the blood? Not hers. Rob's. Forensics confirmed it. The scarf had been used, possibly to clean a weapon, or to wipe fingerprints. But what was it doing in the vault? Who brought it there? And when? That's where the timeline began to crack. Because remember, the basement vault was locked. The last known access? Tracy, 3 nights before the murders. She had entered the house under the guise of a late-night talk with Michelle. She never mentioned the basement. But the key logs don't lie. She was down there. And when she left, the scarf was no longer in Romy's drawer. Let's pause. At this point in the investigation, what do we have? A plan found in Nick's guest house. A confession whispered on a voice note. And now, an actual, physical item tying Tracy to the crime scene. Still not enough? Then consider this. Item 5, a printed email. From Rob to his lawyer. Never sent. Drafted. Saved. Dated December 12th. 2 days before the murders. It read, "I fear my daughter may harm me. I've never said that before, but I've seen the look in her eyes. It's not sadness. It's not disappointment. It's intent. If something happens, please protect Romy." That was the nail in the coffin. Not in the courtroom, yet, but in the minds of detectives. There was no turning back. This wasn't just a family tragedy. This was premeditated, strategic, emotional murder. And Tracy was at the center. But if you think that's the worst of it, just wait. Because remember that USB? Inside, along with the surveillance footage, were recordings. Conversations between Rob and Michelle. Private, emotional, painful. One clip, labeled T Confrontation, caught the tail end of a screaming match. You can hear Rob say, "You threatened Romy. You said she'd pay. What does that even mean, Tracy?" And her response? Muffled, but clear. "You'll see. That was 6 days before the murders. And Romy never knew. She never knew her parents feared her sister. She never knew how close danger was. Until she walked into that room and saw the blood. So now the question becomes, if this evidence was sitting in a basement vault, why didn't Rob take it to police sooner? The answer? Maybe he still hoped for reconciliation. Maybe he didn't think it would go this far. What's more dangerous than a killer with a plan? A liar with something to lose. And when Tracy Reiner walked into the Brentwood precinct wearing a neatly pressed blazer and that familiar Hollywood composure, she thought she could charm her way through the interrogation room. She smiled. She spoke softly. She even made tea. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, is that her timeline had already begun to crumble, piece by piece, lie by lie. And the detectives? They were just waiting for her to bury herself. Let's start with what Tracy said. According to her initial statement, she left the Reiner estate at 11:45 p.m. on December 13th. She claimed she had a tense but civil dinner with the family, then left after an emotional disagreement with her father. She said she drove to a boutique hotel downtown, one she had booked that morning. She said she arrived, checked in, and spent the rest of the night watching old family films alone in her suite. Sounds neat, right? Problem was, none of it was true. Detectives began with the basics. First stop, the hotel. There was no reservation under her name. Not that night. Not that week. No record of check-in. No security footage showing her arrival. In fact, footage did show a woman who looked like Tracy entering around 12:15 a.m., but it wasn't her. It was another guest, verified by ID. Strike one. Next, traffic cameras. If Tracy had driven downtown at the time she claimed, she would have passed at least 2 major intersections with surveillance feeds. Detectives pulled the footage. License plate, not logged. Car, not spotted. But just after 2:14 a.m., a black Lexus matching hers was caught turning back into the Reiner neighborhood. Same model, same plates, time-stamped. Strike 2. Then came the phone records. Between 1:47 and 2:09 a.m., Tracy made 7 unanswered calls to Nick. Short, desperate. All placed within a 10-minute radius of the Reiner estate. And the last one lasted 23 seconds. It connected. No one knows what was said. Nick never revealed it. Tracy claimed she butt dialed. But who butt dials the same person 7 times? Strike 3. By the time detectives called her back for a second interview, they already had her cornered. And they were ready to pounce. Interrogation Room B. Tracy sits calmly, arms crossed, sipping water. Detective Marcus Bell leans forward. "We've pulled your hotel logs, Tracy. You weren't there." A pause. A tilt of the head. "That's strange," she says. "I booked it under a different name. I didn't want press attention." "Oh," Bell replies. "And what name would that be?" She pauses. Blinks. I don't remember. My assistant handled it." Bell smirks. "Funny. Your assistant says they were off that weekend. And the alias you used? Marcia May? That's the name of an adult film actress." Silence. A crack in the facade. Then, a forced laugh. "Well, maybe I was being cheeky." Bell doesn't blink. "And what about your car? Cameras show you returning to the neighborhood just after 2:10 a.m. Another pause. "I was worried. I had a weird feeling. I thought I'd left my scarf." "You didn't go inside the main house?" "No." "Didn't enter the guest house either?" She shakes her head. Too quickly. "No. I just drove by. I panicked. I left again." Bell drops the real bomb. "We have your keycard pinging the guest house at 2:47 a.m. Dead silence. She looks down, then up. "I wanted to talk to Nick. That's all." "About what?" "Family stuff. The trust. He was upset." "Did you bring anything with you?" "No." "Did you leave anything behind?" "No." He slides the photo across the table. The one of the black scarf. Stained. Folded in the basement box. This look familiar? She doesn't answer. He slides the second photo. The murder plan. Her handwriting. "Did you write this?" "No." "Forensic analysis says otherwise." She folds her arms tighter. "We found a note in your father's office. He said he was afraid of you." "That's absurd." "Is it?" She looks away. No tears. No emotion. Just calculation. Like she's not in an interrogation room. She's on a soundstage, waiting for her close-up. But here's the catch. This time, the script isn't hers to control. Because just then, Detective Alvarez enters, holding a laptop. She plays the voicemail from Rob, the one he left at 2:44 a.m. for his lawyer. Tracy's here. She knows. I think. The call cuts. But the message is clear. Rob knew. Rob was scared. And minutes later, he was dead. Tracy stares at the screen. Still no tears. Just silence. But her pulse? Now visible in her neck. Detectives notice. And then, Bell delivers the final blow. Tracy, this isn't about cleaning up a mess. This is about creating one. And right now, you're the only one still pretending there's no blood on your hands. She says nothing, but her face has changed. The confidence? Gone. The mask? Cracking. She's not innocent. She's not naive. She's calculating her odds. And they're not looking good. Outside the interrogation room, the DA's office is already preparing a case for accomplice to murder, or worse. And while Tracy spins a narrative of denial, more evidence is surfacing, including something the public hasn't seen yet. A backup of her iCloud Notes app, pulled via warrant. It includes one entry, dated 2 weeks before the murders. It reads, "Ours new draft equals war. If I don't act, it all slips away. He's pushing me out. She's too young to handle this. Must do what's necessary. T and N equals all that's left. T and N. Tracy and Nick. Not just siblings. Not just outcasts. Co-conspirators? Or something even darker. A twisted bond built on bitterness? That entry, coupled with her destroyed alibi, cements the theory for prosecutors. She wasn't just involved. She was the brain. And Nick? He was the blade. But still, Tracy maintains her innocence. She hires a new lawyer, goes on a public relations campaign, issues a statement through her rep. I love my parents deeply. I would never harm them. These accusations are based on manipulated timelines and circumstantial evidence. I will fight them to the end. But the timeline doesn't lie. The cameras, the phone logs, the scarf, the plan, the basement box, and worst of all, Romy, who tells investigators something no one else had. That night, when I went into my dad's study around midnight, Tracy was already there, alone. And when she saw me, she jumped. Why? She said I wasn't supposed to see something. What was it? Romy hesitates, then whispers. The trust. It was open on the desk. And in that moment, she saw everything. The change in inheritance. The final blow. The motive. That's when Tracy said it. Not loud. Not threatening. But clear. You don't know what he's done to me. And when it happens, don't act surprised. That was hours before the murder. And Romy didn't tell anyone. Because she didn't believe her sister was capable. But now, she wishes she had. Because maybe, just maybe, it would have saved them. But the story isn't over yet. Because just as the trial begins, and Tracy pleads not guilty, a new piece of audio surfaces. Something no one expected. A secret voice memo, recorded by Rob. In his final moments, and in that shaky, blood-soaked breath, he manages to say 2 names. One is Nick. The other isn't Tracy. It's someone else. A third player. An unexpected twist. And one final betrayal. What would your last words be if you knew you had seconds to live? Would you scream? Would you beg? Or would you try to leave behind a clue? One last desperate whisper into the dark? Rob Reiner, in his final moments, didn't scream. He didn't cry. He recorded. And what he captured in that fleeting, blood-soaked breath shattered everything we thought we knew about this case. Because it wasn't just a name. It was a bombshell. A twist no one saw coming. And it changed the entire trajectory of the trial. But let's rewind, because the story behind that voice memo is just as twisted as what it revealed. Here's what happened. A month after the initial investigation, the Reiner estate's electronics, phones, tablets, hard drives, were still being combed through by digital forensic teams. Most of it was noise, scripts, production notes, emails, photos. Nothing incriminating. Until one technician stumbled on something strange in the metadata of Rob Reiner's iPhone backup. A voice memo file. Corrupted. Hidden in a folder marked drafts. It hadn't been accessed since the night of the murders. But the timestamp? 2:53 a.m. Just minutes before police believe Rob was killed. And what's more, it had been recorded on the voice memo app, not the call log. Meaning Rob wasn't calling for help. He was documenting. A man known for telling stories. telling his last. The audio was short, 41 seconds. But in that time, Rob said more than anyone expected. Let's break it down. The first 7 seconds? Heavy breathing. A scuffle. The distinct click of a lock turning. Then his voice, raspy, strained, barely audible. This is Rob Reiner. If this is found, I didn't fall. I didn't trip. They're in the house. Tracy was here. Silence. A crash. Muffled voices, too distant to make out clearly. Then, the shocking part. Nick. I saw Nick. But someone else. Randy, why is he? And then, static. Then nothing. The recording cuts out. Just like that. Now, let's talk about the name that blew this case wide open. Randy. Not Tracy. Not Nick. Randy. So who is Randy? Turns out, he's not just some forgotten family friend. He's Randy Monroe. A name the public had never heard before, but the Reiner family knew him well. Randy was Rob's former business manager, a man with access to accounts, contracts, real estate portfolios. He was quietly fired in 2022 after a financial dispute, but no lawsuit was ever filed. Everything was kept quiet. Too quiet. But here's where it gets even darker. Just 3 weeks before the murders, Michelle allegedly told her sister something chilling. Rob thinks Randy's still pulling strings behind the scenes. He's spooked. Says Randy's got dirt on Tracy and Nick both. Something about overseas transfers. Her sister shrugged it off. But the memo proves one thing. Rob didn't shrug it off. He feared it. Enough to say Randy's name with his last breath. Investigators immediately launched a deep dive into Randy Monroe. What they found? Suspicious activity. Several large transfers. Over $250,000 each. Moved from a dormant Reiner business account to shell companies traced back to Monaco. Guess who co-signed those transactions? Tracy. Yes, Tracy. And when pressed, she claimed it was legacy business her father authorized. Problem is, Rob didn't authorize it. His signature had been forged. And guess whose email requested the bank release the funds? Randy's. It was all starting to make sense. This wasn't just about inheritance. This wasn't just about jealousy. This was about a coordinated financial betrayal, and the lengths people will go to cover their tracks. Now let's go back to the voice memo. Digital analysts enhanced the background audio, and in the final 5 seconds, just before it cuts out, you hear it. A voice yelling. Male. Aggressive. The words? You weren't supposed to see that. Then, glass breaking. Then silence. That voice. Not Nick. Not Rob. Not even Randy. But the match? It came back as Tracy. Screaming. Panicked. Caught in the act. So let's step back. Rob was stabbed. His wife attacked. Tracy was seen re-entering the house. Nick was incoherent. Randy was supposedly gone from the Reiner family. But suddenly, all roads lead back to him. So how did Randy respond? He vanished. Left Los Angeles just 2 days after the murder. Flew to Belize. Stayed off the grid for weeks. By the time a warrant was issued, he'd lawyered up and gone completely silent. But there's more. Remember the missing 13 minutes of surveillance footage? Security teams found signs that the hard drive had been remotely accessed from an external IP address. That address belonged to Randy's office. That's not speculation. That's fact. He had remote access to the Reiner home's internal systems. He had motive. And now, thanks to Rob's final voice memo, he was on record, not just as a suspect, but as someone who shouldn't have been there. Let's go back to that haunting quote. Nick. I saw Nick. But someone else. Randy, why is he? Why was Randy there? What was he trying to destroy? What had Rob seen that he wasn't supposed to? Some believe it was a folder in the vault. Some believe it was a burner phone. But whatever it was, it led to 2 people being stabbed and 1 voice memo the killers never knew existed. Until now. This revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Because suddenly, Tracy's defense fell apart. She wasn't a misguided daughter. She was a co-conspirator. A puppet. Or worse, the one pulling the strings. Nick's defense team seized the opportunity. They argued that Nick was manipulated by both his sister and Randy. That he was emotionally blackmailed, spiraling from medication, and unaware of the full plan. And the evidence? Supported the theory. Nick's prints weren't on the murder weapon. Tracy's were. Randy's DNA was found, faint, but present, on the basement doorknob. And Rob's own voice, shaky and afraid, named them both. That voice memo. It was the emotional climax of the trial, played in front of a silent courtroom. Gasps, tears, and one audible sob from Romy, because in that final whisper, her father had done the one thing no one thought possible. He told the truth. He left a breadcrumb trail, and it led straight to the people he feared most. So now, the case wasn't just about murder. It was about conspiracy, fraud, cover-ups, and family betrayal on a level no Hollywood screenplay could dream up. But we're still not done. Because just when it seemed the walls had closed in around Tracy and Randy, one more witness came forward. One who had remained quiet. One who had everything to lose. And her testimony would set the courtroom on fire. They say the camera doesn't lie. But what if it flies? Hovering above, silent and unnoticed, watching the very moment a family implodes. That's exactly what happened in the quiet hours of December 14th. Because while Rob Reiner lay dying inside his Brentwood mansion, there was a silent witness circling overhead. Not a person, not a cop, a drone, a small recreational drone, piloted by a tech-savvy neighbor who had no idea he was about to capture the most crucial evidence in the entire case. And what it revealed not only confirmed Rob's final voice memo, it shattered Tracy's entire defense. Let's go back. The drone belonged to Tyler Finch, 32, web developer, drone enthusiast, lived 2 houses down. That night, around 2:30 a.m., he launched his drone, purely out of boredom. He often flew it to test out night vision settings, usually over the street or local park. But that night, something strange drew him toward the Reiner estate. Maybe it was the sudden flicker of lights. Maybe it was the shouting he thought he heard in the wind. Either way, he turned the drone's lens toward the massive $13.5 million mansion. The recording began at 2:42 a.m., and what it captured stunned prosecutors, defense attorneys, and viewers across the world. Let's break down the footage. 2:42 and 17 seconds a.m. The drone stabilizes, zooming in on the Reiner estate's second floor. The curtains to the master bedroom are partially open. A figure is seen, moving quickly, wearing dark clothing. 2:42 and 39 seconds a.m. A shadow crosses the hall. Another person, distinctly smaller, possibly female. There's a brief flash of light, possibly a cell phone screen or flashlight. 2:43 and 1 second a.m. The back door to the guest house opens. A third figure steps out, looks around, and returns inside. Based on timestamps and positions, this figure matches Nick Reiner's build and clothing. 2:43 and 58 seconds a.m. The second floor lights shut off. Everything goes dark. 2:46 and 10 seconds a.m. Suddenly, movement on the side of the house. The drone captures a woman, clearly visible now, wearing a designer coat with a unique shimmer. A coat later confirmed to be Tracy Reiner's, a custom silver-threaded trench only worn at high-profile events. She's holding something in her right hand. It glints, sharp, metallic, and then she steps back toward the house. 2:47 and 22 seconds a.m. The basement door creaks open. Tracy disappears inside. The door closes. 2:53 and 3 seconds a.m. A burst of movement at the master bedroom window. Curtains swing. A lamp crashes. A scream, barely audible in the drone's mic. And then, nothing. Silence. Stillness. And less than 5 minutes later, Romy finds her parents' bodies. That footage, nearly 11 minutes long, was handed over to police after Tyler, horrified by the news coverage the next day, reviewed his recording. He didn't even realize what he had captured. He just thought something felt off. When detectives reviewed the clip, it was the smoking gun. Let's pause. You've now heard about the forged trust, the scarf, the basement box, the voice memo, and now this, the drone footage. Let's be honest. There's no doubt Tracy was there. There's no doubt she lied. The question is, was she alone in this? Because the drone revealed something else. Something subtle. In frame 1483, just before the scream, a second woman appears in the lower yard, hidden behind trees, wearing a hoodie, shorter, lighter build. Not Romy, not Tracy, and not Michelle. So who? Facial recognition didn't confirm the identity. But the positioning, the proximity, it's chilling. Could this be the elusive third conspirator Rob mentioned in his voice memo? Was this Randy, in disguise? Or someone else entirely? Someone not yet in the spotlight? Investigators weren't sure. But here's where things explode. Because during trial, prosecutors played the drone video in full, frame by frame, for the jury. Gasps filled the room when Tracy was clearly seen entering the basement. You could see her expression. Focused. Determined. Not panicked. Not emotional. Controlled. Her walk? Not of someone fleeing a scene, but of someone securing it. As if the real crime was already done. And then came the courtroom bombshell. Romy took the stand. Tearful. Steady. Furious. She pointed at the paused drone footage and said, "That's the code I helped her pick out last year." She said it made her look invincible. She paused, then added, "I guess it worked." The jury was silent. Tracy, stone-faced, refused to look at her sister. Defense attorneys tried to dismiss the footage. They argued low resolution. They questioned shadows. They claimed Tracy was framed or the footage was misinterpreted. But the code? Undeniable. The timestamps? Matched perfectly with Rob's voice memo. The drone didn't lie, but there was one more twist. Remember that figure in the backyard? The second woman? Investigators found a single strand of blonde hair on a tree branch just outside the guest house. DNA test? Not a match to Tracy. Not a match to Romy. But a match to Randy Monroe's personal assistant. A woman named Leanne Draper. A former junior producer. A quiet background figure. Rarely seen. Rarely photographed. But the day after the murder, she disappeared, quit her job, left her apartment, and hasn't been found since. So now we have a murder, a forged will, a secret vault, a disappearing assistant, and a drone that captured almost everything. Almost. Because even with all this evidence, one thing still haunted the investigators. The missing 13 minutes. The blackout in the home's surveillance system between 2:39 and 2:52 a.m. Exactly when the murders happened. Exactly when Rob left his final voice memo. That gap? Still unexplained. The drone helps, but it doesn't cover every angle. It doesn't show inside the house. And that's where the real horror played out. So now, as the trial barrels toward a climax, and the public turns on Tracy, and prosecutors build their narrative brick by damning brick, one question remains. Who was the final hand on the knife? Was it Nick? Was it Tracy? Or was it someone else? Because if Randy and Leanne were involved, and if they were never charged, then justice is still hanging in the air. Like that drone. Circling. Watching. Waiting. And we're about to discover. The worst is yet to come. What if the confession wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of another lie? Because when Nick Reiner sat in that cold interrogation room, staring at the floor, blood drying on his sleeves, and whispered, "I tried to stop her," everyone thought he'd finally cracked, that the truth was out, that the sun had snapped. But what if that wasn't a confession? What if it was a cry for help, from someone who'd been caught in a trap too deep to escape? Because when we unpack Nick's so-called confession, piece by trembling piece, what emerges is not the clear-cut narrative prosecutors hoped for. Instead, it's a muddled fog of manipulation, psychological trauma, and a timeline that keeps shifting like quicksand. Let's go back to the night of the murders. Nick was found just after 3:15 a.m., sitting barefoot in the Reiner estate's backyard, mumbling, staring at the garden gate. At first glance, it looked like a breakdown. His hoodie was smeared with blood. His fingernails were dirty, bits of dried grass and something darker wedged beneath them. When officers approached, he didn't resist, didn't flinch. He simply whispered, "I tried to stop her." Police took that as an admission of guilt. And maybe it was. But who was he trying to stop? Tracy? Randy? Leanne? Or was it someone else entirely? Because what followed was one of the most controversial interrogation tapes of the entire case. Nick was questioned for 11 hours without a lawyer. Yes, you heard that right. 11 hours. No attorney. No sleep. No medication. Remember, Nick had a documented history of psychiatric disorders. Schizoaffective episodes. Generalized anxiety. Medication-induced psychosis. He'd been on and off lithium, Seroquel, Ativan, and that night, his toxicology screen showed he'd missed 2 doses. Now ask yourself, would you trust a confession from someone in that condition? Detectives pushed hard. They needed clarity. But what they got was confusion. Let's look at Nick's statements, hour by hour. Hour 1 to 2. He admits he was in the guest house all night. Says he heard shouting around 2:30 a.m. Claims Tracy came over to talk. Mentions she was scared. and said they were cutting us out. When asked if he entered the main house, he hesitates. Then, I think, I followed her. Hour 3 to 4. He's shown the crime scene photos. Visibly disturbed. Cries. Vomits. Hyperventilates. Says. There was blood already. I didn't know it would be that much. Then whispers. I didn't want them to die. Detectives press. Who stabbed Rob? Nick. Not me. I swear. I swear. Who did? Nick. I don't know. She was holding